Greetings, Namaste, welcome to our Facebook Live series on the wisdom of Yogananda. My name is Nayaswami Devarshi. Each week we take a question that's been submitted in previous weeks and try to answer it. And at the end of the talk today, in about 10 minutes, you can submit other questions, and I'll tell you how to do that at the end. This week's question is a very poignant one, and one I think that most of us have had to face at one time or another. The question, how do I forgive my close relatives who have been selfish and who have hurt me financially, emotionally, and physically? This is a complex question, and I'm not going to give a straight answer because so much depends on the relationship that you have with this relative, how close, whether you are still living with them, how severely they've hurt you, and in what ways, how abusive maybe it's even been. And so there's a lot of nuance to this. And if they've hurt you financially, emotionally, and physically, this is almost the type of situation where you want to flee and just get away from that person altogether. And yes, forgiveness is something that we don't have to do and express to the person outwardly. And so I'm going to answer first the question, why should we forgive? And what's the reason for forgiveness? Because this will inform this other question of how we forgive. Why should we forgive anybody? Why not hold resentment and anger and just revenge, all these qualities? Well, the main answer is that forgiveness is good for us. It doesn't really matter too much about the other person, although it can help the other person. But the main reason to forgive is to heal our own heart. When we hold on to resentments, when we hold on to anger, when we hold on to past hurts, that's a poison that's affecting us, and it causes us a lot of problems. And so the main reason to forgive is to heal our own heart. Now, whether we express that forgiveness outwardly is another story altogether, and I'll get into that in a minute. But forgiveness is mostly for our own sake. Paramahansa Yogananda, he talked about this with the law of karma. He said that when we do not judge others, when we forgive others, he said the law of karma is kinder to us. And he would often quote the words of Christ, who said, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." And so when we are forgiving of others, then the law of karma, in a way, is not as harsh and unforgiving with us. And so this is one other reason why we should try to learn to be forgiving. Swami Kriyananda writes about forgiveness in this way. He says, "Forgiveness is the sword of victory. When we forgive those who seek to hurt us, we rob them of their very power to do us harm. Better still, if they respond with love, they will unite their strength to ours, and so our strength becomes doubled. But forgiveness should not be given primarily for its effect on others, but rather for the freedom it affirms in our own hearts. Let no outward circumstance condition your inner happiness. Be not pleased merely when man is pleased. Be pleased rather when you feel God's pleasure in your heart." And so two things here. One is, again, forgiveness is to heal our own heart. If we go through our entire life with this poison brewing inside of us, we're the ones who are harmed in the end. But another point that Swami Kriyananda makes here is that forgiveness, he calls it the sword of victory. And this means that it must come from a position of strength. It's not a deference to another person who has hurt us, and we don't want to do it in such a way that it allows them to hurt us again and to continue taking advantage of us. And so this is the aspect of forgiveness, of how to forgive. First of all, do the best to forgive in your heart, mentally, on the level of feeling. Sometimes it can help to send healing energy, love, forgiveness in prayer, in meditation to another person. If the person is really evil and is continuing to try to hurt you, that may not be the best thing. I've heard Swami Kriyanandaji advise in this regard that by opening ourselves up and loving someone who really is evil and is just continuing to try to hurt us, that can open ourselves to be more open to being hurt and taken advantage of again. So we must also be strong in ourselves. I'm going to tell a story in this regard. It has to do more with the practice of ahimsa or nonviolence, but it also relates to this practice of forgiveness. It's about a poisonous snake. And the villagers did not like poisonous snakes, and because they attacked this snake frequently, the snake defended itself and had killed a couple of villagers. And he was just being mercilessly attacked by the villagers. So one day the snake met a saint, and he asked the saint, "How can I overcome this difficulty that I have? Every time a villager sees me, he strikes me and tries to harm me." And the saint practiced nonviolence or ahimsa, and he advised this snake, "Stop biting the villagers, and they will stop harming you." And so the snake did this. But then the villagers saw that he was not biting anymore, and so they started taking advantage of them. They lost their fear of the snake. They started harming it even more, and the snake went back to the saint, covered with blood and wounds, and said, "Look what's happening to me as a result of this practice of nonviolence." And the saint said, "I didn't tell you not to hiss at the villagers. I only told you not to bite." And this was a lesson for the snake. Nonviolence in this case didn't mean to be continued to be taken advantage of and harmed. It was very important for the snake to stand up for itself, hiss, threaten, scare the villagers. And so he did that, and he was freed from their harming him after that. And so forgiveness does not mean continuing to allow someone to hurt us. And so this, in some ways, determines whether and how we should actually express our forgiveness for someone. It's not necessary to express it. Sometimes, again, if the person is still trying to hurt us or take advantage of us, expressing forgiveness may, on the one hand, if they're open to being changed, it may help them and it may change them, depending on the person and how powerfully and strongly you express that forgiveness and how you do it. On the other hand, it may just convince them that you're just ripe to be taken advantage of again and again. So you have to be careful with expressing forgiveness. And that's why forgiveness really starts within, and then you have to determine whether you should express it or not. Now, in extreme cases of really extreme violent abuse or, which relatives can do, I've heard many stories of this, sometimes the best thing is to just keep them completely out of your life altogether. Try to forgive them, but you don't owe it to them to continue to show your love for them if they're just going to keep trying to take advantage of you. And again, this is extreme cases, but I know of people who their parents were extremely abusive, physically, violently, and in many other ways. And they just essentially stopped seeing their parents, returning their calls, completely separated themselves from that situation. That's an extreme case. But sometimes we do need to stand up for ourselves and just step back from the situation and then try to forgive. Sometimes in these very, very extreme cases, which I've heard of many times again, it can be very, very difficult to forgive. And I'm certainly not going to judge anybody who cannot find it in their heart to forgive someone who has really extremely abused them. Do try to find a way to forgive. It will heal your own heart, but do it from a position of strength and love. And again, there's no need to express it to the other person. Perhaps you can, but you have to sensitively feel in your own heart and tune into the situation and decide whether that expression of that forgiveness is going to be helpful to you especially, or to the other person, or whether it's just going to cause them to see you as being weak and take advantage of you. So forgiveness, when Swami Kriyananda says it's the sword of victory, it can be, because I think that in some ways when people take advantage of us and harm us in those ways, it's almost like they get a 2-for-1 special deal, because they harm us with the act and then they continue to harm us by us feeling resentment and anger and hate and all these negative emotions in ourselves. And so again, it all comes down to forgiveness is really the best thing that we can do for ourselves. So do your best to try to overcome these negative emotions and send the person that love, that kindness. It doesn't have to be done outwardly. In fact, you can forgive someone and speak very, very strongly to them about what they've done. One doesn't exclude the other. And in many situations, you do have to be strong and stand up for yourself. Now, sometimes people may ask, what is the karma that caused me to be taken advantage of and harmed? And sometimes this can be a good question to ask, but sometimes it just might cause us to feel like we deserved this in some way. And very often, I think the best answer to that question is, what lesson can I learn from this experience? And these lessons can be many. One of them is unconditional forgiveness and love, because you'll find that if you harbor resentment and anger and carry it all the way to the end of this life, it's quite possible that you will have to be reborn with that person, that the magnetism of that hatred will actually attract that person in a future lifetime so that you can complete and successfully work out this poison that's in you. So try to find a way to forgive in some way, whatever way possible, and then determine if it needs to be expressed. And again, finally, it really depends on the severity of the abuse. If it is severe, then yes, I would say keep that person out of your life. There's no need or reason that you have to engage with them. And again, it depends on the particular relationship, whether you're dependent on them. And finally, in cases of just marriage, very close friendship, we must forgive. If marriages did not have forgiveness, there were very few marriages that would survive. As Mahatma Gandhi said, that an eye for an eye would make the whole world blind. And especially in many family and human relationships, there does have to be a high level of forgiveness for the hurts that we intentionally or unintentionally cause. But again, this is in a more normal human relationship. And so apply this teaching of forgiveness sensitively, with awareness. It's a complex question. And so only each one of us can determine the best way to apply it, whether we express it or whether we just feel it in our hearts. Now, if you have any questions on another subject that you would like to ask or to know more about, type it into the comments section on the Facebook Live feed here, and we'll try to dedicate one of the future episodes to your problem, your question, your query. So may joy be with you always, and may this great grace of divine unconditional love fill all of our hearts, and may we become free inside. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.